So I don't know if everyone is aware of this, but President Macron actually went to China to meet with Xi Jinping during a time when his country is kind of crazy right now. During a time when France is actually burning. We're going to get into that story as well. But he went there to China, and there was something that Macron said that I think everyone needs to pay attention to in reference to where he stands with China. Because Macron is actually going to admit that regardless of the tensions between Russia and Ukraine right at this point in time, that they still need China. Listen to this.
You're live with BBC News. Let's take you to China now, because the French President Emmanuel Macron and the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, are on a 3-day trip there in hopes of resetting relations. We have some live pictures coming to us, actually. This is President Macron speaking earlier, but there are some pictures that we're going to bring you in a moment after we've heard from him. He is travelling with a 50-strong business delegation. And on the agenda for the trip is talks around Ukraine, as Beijing's refusal to condemn Russia over its invasion of Ukraine has really soured relations with Europe. In his speech, Mr. Macron warned that Europe must not separate from China economically.
So you see, he realizes here that even though he may disagree with China's agreement with Russia, he also knows at the same time he cannot afford to separate from China economically. This speaks to something that Eric brought up a couple nights ago when he said, how are we just going to push off China when they make most of our stuff? Realistically, how many things in your house do you own, including your clothes? How many of those items say made in America? He realizes that I don't know if it's a good idea for him to be in China right now, because France is on fire. We'll get into that as well.
Donc il ne faut pas de naïveté, c'est ce que notre Union européenne, je l'en félicite.
We must not be naive. Our European Union taking this step of European sovereignty that I defended 5 years ago is establishing trade defense instruments that are necessary for our credibility. But the EU must also be voluntarily committed to continuing to have a trade relationship with China.
He is not willing to cut off trade with China at this point in time because he knows that he still needs them economically. This, I don't know if the Biden administration has commented on this yet, but this should be a wake-up call for people. This should be a big wake-up call. That's right, JB says, ha, ha, ha. Big news flash. You actually need them. So for people saying, oh, yeah, we need to do this to China, da-da-da. You need China. Even Macron realizes that. Now, he can't control his own country right now, but he does realize that he does need them.
And so we must, in a way, de-risk our economies, never be fully dependent. And this is what China wants for itself when dealing with Europe and the United States. But we must not dissociate ourselves and separate ourselves in a logic that would, in a way, suggest that ultimately we are meant to do nothing together anymore.
There you go. There you have it. So China, as you know, is a part of BRICS. China has already announced as well, we covered this a couple days ago, that they are going to get rid of the US dollar. They've announced this with Brazil. I think they may be trying to get Saudi Arabia on board with this as well. BRICS as a whole, to get rid of the US dollar and to have their own currency. So a lot of people are upset with China and the rest of them for BRICS right now. But he's telling you, look, I understand what's happening, but at the same time, we really cannot afford to break away from them economically altogether. We still have to have some type of relationship with them economically. Let's go on a little bit more here.
So as I mentioned, he's traveling with a 50-strong delegation, and he is with some of them right now. These are live pictures coming to us from Beijing, where that is the back of President Macron, but he is opening Crossroads, which is a festival at the Modern Art Red Brick Museum in Beijing. You can see him now just enjoying the exhibition, the festival as well, and the things that are happening there.
And he's enjoying that festival and that exhibition. And while he's having a good old time Something is going down in France.
Significant visit, really, because these close links that exist could mean that President Macron could be influential in helping Xi Jinping end the war in Ukraine. That was the suggestion today. Mr. Macron did say that any nation supporting Russia would be an accomplice to Moscow's aggression. And we've actually seen a constant stream of rhetoric coming from many Western countries trying to tell China, do not supply weapons to Russia. So the talks, we think there will be conversations, of course, about the war in Ukraine, but also trade very much dominating the agenda as well.
So that is why he is there, to talk about trade and to also talk about possibly coming to some type of resolution in reference to this conflict with Russia and Ukraine. But it's really interesting to me that Macron wants to come to some type of resolution with another country, and he can't come to a resolution with his own people in his own country right now. As you know, the protesters have been protesting in France nonstop. They have been setting things on fire. This is now day 11. These protests have not stopped. They have not decreased. In fact, I told you before, mainstream media is actually deflating the numbers. It's actually more than what they're saying out there. Millions of people. And now these protests have actually spread across the country. It's not just Paris. They're also in places like Normandy. Now, this came from Bernie's tweet, says, France, this is Normandy. The protests aren't confined to Paris. They are all over the country, all ages, backgrounds, and demographics, and all against the circumventing of Parliament. Dictators fall eventually. So here are protesters in Normandy. So there they are in Normandy. Now, mainstream media, again, like I said, they're not really focusing on this as much. They're trying to not, I think, because, again, they don't want the American people to start getting ideas. But it's getting to the point now where certain things are happening where they have no choice to avoid it anymore, like this. When I talked about general strike, I said before, you need to shut down the ports. You need to get the port workers, the truckers, and the railroad workers all together in the U.S. Boom, that's your general strike because you shut down transportation. They understand that in France. They have now shut down the ports. So you'll see here, it says, meanwhile, in France, the port workers are refusing to work, leaving over 50 tankers stranded off the coast, LNG gas imports included. No word from Macron. He thinks he can win this. He can't. And here's a video here where you can see these tanks are stranded. I want to share this. And you'll see as they're driving by, let me pull out, come back in. Sometimes, like I said, these Twitter videos can be a doozy. But you'll see, look at this. So they're showing you, they're stranded. You see them out in the ocean? The port workers are gone. Yeah. So you see, while Macron is in China having a jolly old time, shit's going down back at home. When he returns back to France, he's probably already seen this in the news. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't even know if he's looking at Twitter or anything like that. But there's just so many things that are happening. They've also blocked off the roads. Look at this. Cat A says, France, today the mayhem continues with blockades on highways, protests at schools, and efforts to shut down industry, even the Amazon site, all leading up to a massive protest this Thursday. I told you they are not playing around. Don't mess with the French. So you can see here, they've blocked off the road. They've set things on fire here. So the cars right here can't get through. Unless they want to drive through fire. You see all the cars backed up? They don't care at all. And they made it so that, you know how during the George Floyd protests, there were protesters that had blocked off the roads with their bodies. And then there was actually one video of a car trying to drive through the protesters. So in France, what they did is they said, you know what? If we stand in the middle of the road, they could try to do that to us too. How about we just set things on fire? So if they really want to drive through, their car has to drive through fire. They're not going to do that. That's why the cars are backed up here and they're just sitting there. They just said, screw this. You are not going anywhere. Now, when we have those types of protests here in the US, people said that we were being disruptive. But the French is like, no, they get this. Like to them, this is like, no, this is the point. We will do whatever we can to stop the madness. It goes on, though. They have also decided to burn Macron's favorite restaurant. They don't care. They said, you know what, Macron, you and your $80,000 watch and your fancy restaurant, you may still have the watch, but we're going to make sure you can't eat at this restaurant anymore. And that's exactly what they did. There's someone up there, I think, trying to pour water on it. Let's see. I don't see the police. That was another thing when I saw this video. I mean, the people have outnumbered the police at this point. That's the other thing. Some police officers, I have to find the video, but there was one video where there were some police officers that said, screw it, and joined the protesters. Because, I mean, again, it's like I said, there's more of them than there are of the police. So they are greater in number. Yeah, there's someone up here. This person right here, I think they have a bucket of water. I guess they're trying to put water on it to get the fire out. I don't know if a bucket that size is necessarily going to work. So that's another thing that has happened. Like, if I were Macron, I would not feel comfortable returning to France at this point in time. It might be best for him to just stay in China. But the biggest protest act of all happened today. And that was the protesters in France decided to go right to the source of the problems, not Macron's place, but the financial source. And this is what I've said before. We can come after the politicians with attacks all we want to. We can tweet at them. We can call them. But at the end of the day, they're controlled by corporations. They're controlled by the corporate money and greed. The French know that. And that's exactly who they decided to go after. Listen to this. Striking workers storm BlackRock's Paris office to protest the corporate giant's role in privatizing worker pensions. Jerome Schmidt, a union spokesperson, said, the meaning of this action is quite simple. We went to the headquarters of BlackRock to tell them the money of workers for our pensions, they are taking it. You see, they get it. BlackRock manages over 10 trillion in assets, including massive pension plans. I cannot make this up. They know who the main problem is. They went right to the source of the problem. And I told you guys before on this show how powerful BlackRock is. I told you they own almost everything in the freaking world. And the French knew that. and they knew who was going to get control over this pension money. And that's where they went to. And they said, screw it. We are not going to be under your thumb anymore, BlackRock. That was probably the alarm going off that you heard in the background, but like, they don't care. Do you see what I mean? They do not care. Now, this is over the pension reform and what mainstream media is leaving out, that some of these protests are also protests against NATO as well. Look at the way our government has treated people in this country. And people don't even want to do a peaceful protest for the most part. The French have 2 years added onto their retirement in reference to pension reform, and they go rogue and say, we are burning this motherfucker down. They do not care. And the way that certain groups and people have been treated in this country, it is still surprising to me. It is appalling to me that people still actually believe that the politicians are going to save you. And Glenn Greenwald was 100% correct about this when he said, you have to have completely lost faith in the political system. That's how you get the numbers out in the streets like people in France have. They are pissed at Macron, and they decided to take matters into their own hands. Okay, so we have another clip as well that I want to show you because this goes on. Now, this is everyone else after they really did the damn thing. They just stormed in there and said, screw BlackRock. You gotta, I don't know what else to say, but you gotta love it. You gotta love it. I mean, here's this person. I mean, how is that fair to people who just work front desk and now they got to inhale flare smoke? They should join the protesters. Moving on. So this is what people in the US have to understand. You have to go directly to the source. Directly to the source. You can still try to push your politicians, but you have to understand that they are controlled. They're all controlled by the corporate powers. Now, when the French protest, they don't play around. They like to add a little bit of music to their protest too. So I really love this. I'm going to share this with you guys. It says, this is the most French video I ever remixed. Techno activist Math Kale. France protest. Hashtag France Paris. I think you guys are going to like this. Sorry. I love it. I love it. We can learn something from them, guys. We can learn something from them. So Macron is in China. They've stormed BlackRock. Like, I don't know. Probably wasn't a good time for him to leave the country. But the people there are not giving up. They are showing him that they are the ones that really have the power when they all come together because they are greater in number. And what is really important to me is that they understand exactly where the money problem is, and they went right to the source. And that is the piece that we have to get more Americans to understand. They have to understand the corporate powers at play. Now, I feel like Occupy Wall Street was on the right track. But somewhere along the way after that, I feel like some people kind of forgot about that. So we can learn a lot from them. But Macron might want to resign at this point. Might want to resign at this point.